Hey everyone, welcome back. Let's cover a number of very helpful, insightful, and interesting studies regarding male health, testosterone, and how we might be able to optimize testosterone levels and sexual function and performance. And then pivot over to women and some therapeutics interventions for vaginal dryness, low libido, hot flashing, and for bone health. And all of this is taken from this amazing stream of science that's published across the world to help us better learn how to be healthy and vital. So we'll start off with a few studies here in the realm of male health. The first looks at sleep apnea. There's this chicken or the egg debate regarding poor sleep quality, as in sleep apnea, and low testosterone. So this meta-analysis of 18 studies found that those with sleep apnea did have lower levels, or at least an association with lower levels of testosterone. There was also a maintenance of that observation even after controlling for age and for weight. Because it is important to do so, it is possible that what you're seeing is more of an artifact that those who are overweight are more at risk for sleep apnea and also low testosterone. So we can group people into cohorts according to weight and look to see, does the association maintain when controlling for either age or for weight? And it does. Now, the one very important finding here, especially as we've been looking at some sleep studies over time, it's somewhat common that you will see, myself included in this, a finding of mild, maybe even moderate apnea. And the question becomes, well, where do we draw the line where a degree of apnea becomes problematic? Maybe another way of thinking about this, another analogy would be if someone has fasting blood glucose that's 103, is that a problem? And at least this study did not find an association with lower testosterone and mild to moderate apnea, but they did with severe apnea. So I find this at least partially informative in terms of if you're doing something like a WatchPat 1 home sleep test and you come back with a mild or maybe even a moderate apnea, is that always something that you have to intervene regarding? Now, that being said, we've also discussed things like positional devices that can encourage you to side sleep, thus reducing most apnea, or something like the EMST 150, which is the expiration muscle strength training device. You essentially blow against resistance. This trains the muscles in the throat and palate and reduces apnea, at least according to 4 clinical trials. So with an observation of moderate or mild apnea and these therapies on the table, I think it's much more justifiable to intervene with those and maybe not consider something more drastic, uncomfortable, like a CPAP or NPAP if someone has mild to moderate apnea. So from a different study, they wanted to plot out numbers of hours slept and how does this correlate with testosterone. What they found was a recurring concept that we see in biology, this inverted U or this Goldilocks principle. And as you'll see with this schematic here, free testosterone peaked when sleep duration was between 8 and 10 hours per night. Testosterone levels free went down when you had less than 8, but also importantly, more than 10. This is something that came up in Healthy Gut, Healthy You, was that more sleep is not always better. And even as it pertains to other risk factors or other disease states, you'll see an increase in those when people sleep more than 10 hours per night. Now, why that is may indicate there's another issue present, thus requiring the person to sleep more. And so it may not be the sleep in and of itself. It may be that the sleep is needed to recover from whatever the other thing is necessitating more than 10 hours of sleep. But nevertheless, Look at this as an indicator. If you're constantly needing more than 10 hours sleep, speak with your doctor, speak with your healthcare provider, and see if there's something else present. Because as this study found, again, between 8 and 10 hours, sweet spot for optimizing free testosterone. And the free fraction is what can bind to cells and really has the most cellular and therefore metabolic and probably sexual impact. By the way, if this video has been helpful, please comment. I'd be curious to hear your experience or your thoughts on this. Like and subscribe. It really helps feed the algorithm and allow our work to get in front of and hopefully help more people. Okay, now let's go into the realm of how testosterone levels and libido and erectile function intersect. Because it's one thing to look at lab markers and levels, but it's best if we can correlate the levels with whatever it is we're looking to optimize for. I have erectile dysfunction, I have low libido, I have poor concentration. So let's go a little bit further into this conversation and see what we can learn. There's a simple view on interpreting levels of testosterone. This is for total, by the way. Not saying this is the end all be all, but usually if you're below 300 on more than one assessment, 2 in a row, morning testosterone, because it will vary throughout the day, then that can diagnose low testosterone. If you're consistently at or above 300, then that tells us that you don't have low testosterone. Now, is that optimal? I think it's debatable, but just to lead with that preface, some symptoms of low testosterone: low libido, poor erectile function, fatigue, poor concentration, depression, and irritability. And there are also peer-reviewed as the ADAM questionnaire, the androgen deficiency in aging males questionnaire. Do you have decreased libido, lack of energy, decreased strength and or endurance? Have you lost height? Do you have less enjoyment from life? Are you sad or grumpy? This is the grumpy old man syndrome. Do you feel that your erections are less strong? Have you noticed a deterioration in your sports ability? Are you sleepy after dinner? And have you noticed a reduction in your work performance? These are all indicators that low testosterone might be present. I want to be careful because this is one of many a quicksand wherein if you look at these symptoms, they could probably apply to almost every male. It doesn't always mean that low testosterone is a problem. There could be stress, there could be sleep, there could be undereating, overeating, poor exercise. So with all of the commercials you see for androgel and whatever else is being pushed, you just want to take a moment, probably bounce some of this off your healthcare provider to make sure you're not just jumping to testosterone while overlooking what might be a more important factor driving these symptoms, and it may not actually be the testosterone that's the issue. But with that being said, let's look at a dietary intervention that may be able to optimize, increase testosterone levels. Small randomized control trial, 18 men who had low testosterone, and really important here, also had metabolic syndrome. And I'm going to tie back to why that's so important with how we interpret this study in a second. The intervention was a control diet, do nothing, or a low carb diet, 25% of calories, which equates to 125 to 150 grams of carbs per day. That's not terribly low. It's certainly not keto. It's lower carb. I think that has merit for this sort of population. Now, after 3 months, here's what they found. Greater weight loss, 10 pounds compared to 2 pounds in the lower carb group. Not surprising. Any intervention that poses or imposes some restriction will usually lead to weight loss. I think it's incorrect to represent, carbs as always being bad, and it's the carbs, and if you can just control the insulin, then everything will get better. It's one thing, it's one lever or method of reducing overall caloric intake and improving metabolic health. Wouldn't say it's the only one. Here's what else is interesting, and I think prone to misrepresentation and interpretation. Testosterone increased the total fraction, that is, by 81 points in the low carb group and by 10 points in the control group. So clearly 70-point difference of improved total testosterone in the lower carb group, along with improvements in low testosterone symptoms. Now, here's where I will preemptively take issue with how some will interpret this study. See, we told you low carb is the way to go. It's the best for everyone. You got to do low carb. You do low carb, you have better testosterone. This will help some people. Most namely, I would argue, those with metabolic syndrome need to do something to improve their metabolism, need some sort of dietary restriction imposed upon them. Does it have to be low carb? Does that mean low carb is the holy grail for improving testosterone? No. And let's cover some data that articulates that. So we're going to juxtapose this one small study with a meta-analysis of 27 studies, quoting, low carb had no consistent impact on total testosterone. What's the difference? This was in healthy men. So zooming out and thinking really practically, if someone has metabolic syndrome, they're overweight, high blood pressure, potentially high triglycerides or cholesterol, an intervention that makes them healthier, weight loss, should also improve their testosterone. Shocking, nothing new, nothing novel, nothing proprietary, right? Can we extrapolate from that and say, because in this group of people with metabolic syndrome, they went low carb, they improved multiple things, weight loss, improved testosterone, improved symptoms. That means everyone, including healthy males, should use lower carb to optimize their testosterone. No. And in fact, I would conjecture that in healthy men who are also training, a long-term lower carb diet might even have a deleterious impact on their testosterone levels. This study did not find that. This study found that there was no benefit on testosterone when using low carb dieting. So just realize that an intervention that improves someone's health with metabolic syndrome may not equate to how to improve some of those same markers in otherwise healthy individuals. It's not to say that low carb is bad. I just want to arm you with the suspicion when gurus who I'm nearly positive a low carb guru would misrepresent this study. And I just want to be careful that you don't fall into that trap. Now, you've probably heard of Tongkat Ali, aka Longjack. There was a meta-analysis of 9 studies trying to summarize what does the data here show? Is this a worthwhile supplement? My interpretation, maybe. Meta-analysis, pinnacle level of science. So a study looked at either healthy men or men with low testosterone. The intervention was control, nothing placebo, or Longjack. The dosage varied from 100 to 600 milligrams per day. Now, when compared to placebo, they did find that Longjack increased testosterone by more than 50 points compared to placebo. At a dose of 600 milligrams per day, increased testosterone by 150 points more than placebo. The thing here that I find a little bit lackluster is there was no reporting on symptoms. So we don't know, well, okay, the lab marker changed. Did you have better erectile function, better performance, better concentration? We don't know. So I'm open on Tongkat Ali. Truthfully, I haven't looked enough into the negative side effects firsthand, primary literature search, but I have heard some people calling attention to the fact that there may be some deleterious side effects, especially when used long-term. So let's juxtapose this meta-analysis, which I think gives merit to Tongkat Ali or Longjack, but compare it to one using a different compound that has, in my view, a longer history of use and better data supporting it, Ashwaghanda. So this was a randomized controlled trial in 50 healthy men who had low libido, but had normal testosterone, roughly 400 points. Placebo versus ashwagandha at 600 milligrams per day. After 2 months, compared to the placebo, the ashwagandha receiving group had improved sexual desire and about a 60, 70 point increase in their testosterone. I want to be careful comparing a meta-analysis to a randomized control trial, but the point I'm trying to make here is this is one of a handful of studies demonstrating that ashwagandha is either good for fertility or for sexual function or for testosterone levels or all of the above. So I share this just knowing that for whatever reason, Tonka Ali is making lots of media waves, and that's fine. But if it's not the most researched or the most efficacious, then even though you hear about it in the media, it may not be the supplement that you want to use. I think you can make a case for both, but my preference when looking at these data, given the fact that there's more evidence, I think better evidence showing a well-rounded benefit from ashwagandha, makes me favor ashwagandha over Tonka Ali, or maybe you rotate across the two. So here is a interesting schematic showing the changes in sexual desire over time, placebo group compared to ashwagandha group, and clearly there is a significant benefit favoring ashwagandha. Now, another compound I've mentioned on the podcast in the past is HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin. And what this compound does is act as a synthetic, or actually derived from the placenta in many cases, analog or mimicker of LH, luteinizing hormone, which goes from the brain to the gonads and signals production of testosterone. So in this study, participants had low testosterone symptoms, but normal testosterone, again, around 400. Not to say that's optimal, but it's normal. They were given HCG. After 10 months, the HCG improved erectile dysfunction in 86% of men, libido in 80% of men. But look at this, no change in testosterone, and there was no negative side effects. I make these points just because, and as we've discussed so many times on the podcast in the past, biomarkers have merit, but we want to be careful not to treat labs at the expense or the exclusion of people. We want to look for interventions that not only may change a biomarker, but more importantly, in most cases, lead to the symptom improvement that you're after. Because oftentimes consumers make the mistake of thinking, if I modulate said biomarker, I'll resolve the symptoms that I'm frustrated with. And that's not always the case. So we want to be attentive to the fact that we don't always need to. In fact, I would argue in the majority of cases, we don't want to treat a biomarker. We want to use therapies that help with the symptom the person is presenting with. Now, sure, there are exceptions to this, like I've said in the podcast in the past. Frankly, high blood pressure, frankly, hypothyroid, frankly, insulin resistant or high glucose. Sure. But in many cases, someone might have normal-ish testosterone and be sort of chasing after ways to increase my testosterone because I think my low libido was from the low testosterone, and then get pigeonholed into therapies only looking at which ones increase testosterone. Let's say Tonka Ali could be one of those, and overlook other therapies that are very efficacious for the symptoms that you're struggling with. So just sort of keep that heuristic, that paradigm in mind when selecting therapeutics or when selecting what healthcare provider you're going to look to guide the approach that you follow. Okay, let's pivot over to women and menopausal symptoms and what can be used for hot flashes, vaginal dryness, and for bone health. This first study, randomized controlled trial, wanting to evaluate, does improving diet quality reduce postmenopausal hot flashes? Control, continue your current diet, versus a plant-based diet with the addition of soy. One of the things they tracked in this study when people were going plant-based was, would they reduce the consumption of AGEs, advanced glycation end products? When you brown foods that contain either protein or fat, this does actually lead to improved flavor, but an excessive amount of these, an excessive amount of browning or charring leads to more of these AGEs, and these advanced glycation end products can use up your antioxidant reserves. They did find that in the plant-based group, there was a 73% reduction of advanced glycation end products consumed. There was also an 88% reduction in hot flashes. However, this is another study that I think lends itself to selective spin or misinterpretation. Let me show you why. If you look at the difference in dietary patterns in the control versus the plant-based group, you see that those in the control group were eating a less healthy diet. They ate less vegetables, less fiber, more refined grains, more added sugar, and then more meat and dairy, which I think are contestable in terms of are they a problem? But when you look at less fiber, less vegetables, more refined grains, and more added sugar, it's not a very good comparison when comparing that to the fact that there was more vegetables, more fiber in the plant-based group, and less refined grains and less added sugar. Additionally, the fact that they were consuming soy, and soy is a phytoestrogen, meaning it will modulate the estrogen receptor, or at least stimulate it and selectively modulate how it's triggered to be effective for remedying hot flashes. It's hard to say, are these symptomatic improvements of reduction of hot flashes from the diet or from the soy? So I don't mean to quibble over the details, but what I do want to prevent you from getting sort of hoodwinked by is a overly enthusiastic plant-based advocate saying, look, these people had less advanced glycation end products in their diet. They had less hot flashes. This is why it's so important to go plant-based. Well, that's leaving out a lot. It's not controlling for food quality, and it's not accounting for the fact that soy by itself has been shown to reduce hot flashes. So do with that what you will, but the main point from a dietary perspective I want to, leave you with is there are many diets that can work, and it's helpful to get out of the religious fervor for recommending a diet. And data like this are very prone to misinterpretation. So I'll leave it there. This next study, meta-analysis of 21 trials, over 2,800 individuals, looked at menopausal women who were advised on either control, no exercise, or aerobic exercise. The specific parameters were not listed in this meta-analysis. And compared to those not exercising, surprise, surprise, those who engaged in aerobic exercise had an improvement in the severity of their hot flashes with a small effect size, meaning a small magnitude of effect. So that's great. This is something to consider if you're having hot flashes. Don't forget the importance of exercise towards improving the hot flashes. Along with the desire to use lifestyle, diet, and natural supplements toward improving one's health, this study looked at could a vaginally applied herb, hops, be as effective as vaginally applied estradiol for vaginal dryness, sexual desire, and sexual arousal? And the answer is yes. Quoting, "The results of the present study showed that the administration of vaginal hops was as effective as vaginal estradiol in treating postmenopausal women seeking relief from sexual dysfunction." Doesn't mean that you have to pick one over the other or one is better than the other, but as hopefully you probably have become accustomed to, I want to continually showcase for you how powerful diet, lifestyle, and natural supplements can be toward improving your health. And rightfully so, some women may be apprehensive about the use of hormones. And so again, reminder that there is a growing body of evidence demonstrating benefit from plant compounds, from supplements, and the like. And the final study here wanted to examine a very salient question for women. What is the best form of exercise for improving bone health? In our consulting practice, this is something that I kind of have to probe people on periodically, which is it's great that you're walking. It's great that maybe you're doing something like Pilates, jogging, cycling. But if we're trying to maintain healthy bone health, we need to have some type of resistance against the bone. And this trial confirms that. They looked at high intensity resistance training with some impact or low intensity Pilates. And they found that the high intensity exercise group was the group that had the greatest improvement in bone density. So it's important to bear this in mind. And one of the mechanisms through which this occurs is when you stress bone, you have more of this compound, osteocalcin, released, which has cognitive benefits. And we've discussed this in some of the research regarding exercise for brain health, but it also directly impacts bone and stimulates the deposition of minerals into bone and the formation of new or denser bone. So keep in mind that if you are exercising, yes, that's great, but you need to do something that's more high intensity and with some stress on the bone in order to preserve and maintain healthy bone. Okay, well, that is a selection of what I felt to be some of the most salient and applicable research as it pertains to male and male hormone health, and also to female and female hormone, including bone health. And I hope this helps you on your road to being as healthy as you possibly can. This is Dr. Ruscio. I'll talk to you next time.